these are classified more or less in the same fashion, in the same solution, and then the same folks have access to it. But if you take an analogy of, let's say you are worried that there are jewels lying around in your scattered house, right? Somewhere which is not organized properly. But then there are also keys to locker, which has more obviously jewels and cash and high sensitive data. So if you know both of them exist, what would you look for first? Whether there's few scattered jewels or the keys to the locker, which would otherwise give access to everything kind of thing.
Enterprise cyber and AI storage leader Infinidat delivers the utmost technical and business value for your enterprise. Find out why 28% of the Fortune 50 use Infinidat solutions to solve their most difficult issues at infinidat.com. Welcome back, everyone, all the Data Protection Gumbo listeners out there. We really appreciate you tuning in once again. And I'm going to have a very fascinating conversation around the critical divide and around why security and compliance teams must separate data classification controls. And if you are not quite sure what data classification is, you will definitely know exactly what it's all about after we dive into this conversation with Anand Athavale, who is a data management veteran across the industry. So welcome on today, Anand. How are you?
Doing all right, Demetrius. How are you?
I am also doing well. Talk a little bit about why this topic is so crucial in today's cybersecurity landscape for us, Anand.
Thanks, first of all, Demetrius, for having me on your podcast. When we talk about data classification, first, even before we go to why it's important today, let's clearly define for today's topic what we mean by data classification. So it is not just segregating your data based on file types or extensions, like whether those are media files or whether those are temporary files or any other type of office files or those kind of things, right? It's not that. What it is basically what's in it. What does that data take? And data classification from this angle, what does it contain, had been actually more focus of a regulation-centric compliance world for a period of time. And then it stayed there, and it was only that team who was more focused, highly focused on this, depending on which regulations their particular organization needed to adhere. Now, what happened, I think around maybe start to put a timeline, maybe 7, 8 years before, the ransomware attacks were not limiting. They stopped being limited to just data encryption, right? They started another angle to it. Often we hear the term double extortion, where they would encrypt your data also, and then they would steal your data, mostly sensitive data, and hold it to ransom, saying, hey, we don't care that you have a copy of data which you can get back, and hence you are saying you will not pay me. What I do is I'll release that data out to the world. And what happened is then that started bringing out the focus on this particular topic from not just the compliance team, but the security teams also, where they needed to now take care of this aspect of the attack, if you will, or the threat, basically.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting conversation. It's not one that I have every day, but I do look forward to the conversation and want to start off by asking or talking about why is it important to have separate treatment for managing the classification part and also the handling of these two very distinct types of sensitive data that we're talking about.
So if even before we go there, right? Yes. So there are, as of today. So first of all, if we go back in time, even the security frameworks, if my memory serves correctly, The zero trust framework was the first framework I remember in version 2.0 or something that they talked about data classification as a focus of. But now what happened was the focus of security team only has right now focus on, hey, how do I prevent that data, sensitive data to be prevented from exfiltrated, right? Sensitive data itself, which today's most of the data classification solution are able to classify. What are those? One is the regulation centric, which we are aware, PII, credit card data, HIPAA, and those kind of things. The other is not, so they have the classification solutions have added support to find these, but those are not yet separately called out or like focused, which are like your passwords. And you should not write passwords out in the file, but passwords, keys, secrets, so many other type of configs now, which you need with respect to cloud, right? Cloud service, principal IDs and secret keys and all of those, right? So that's another set of data, which I'm talking about. Now, today, what happens, Demetrius, is these are classified more or less in the same fashion, in the same solution, and then the same folks have access to it. But if you take an analogy of, let's say you're looking for, you are worried that there are jewels lying around in your scattered house, right? Somewhere which is not organized properly. But then there are also keys to locker, which has more obviously jewels and cash and high sensitive data. So if you know both of them exist, what would you look for first? Whether there's few scattered jewels or the keys to the locker, which would otherwise give access to everything kind of thing. So just your thoughts around what would you look for first?
Yeah, I would probably look for the keys to the cabinet, right? Because I want to get in.
Yeah, right. And then that's the thing. That's why there needs to be now got the first reason why these two need to be treated differently. And then also the other aspect is need to know basis. The compliance teams actually require, do not or should not have the access or means to classify these password or security. They don't have any use of that, right? So that should not be in their purview. Versus the security teams actually need access to, they need to know about both, right? So that's one of the things which needs to start to segregate.
And so you talked about separating the controls. How do you separate the actual work? Because I know when it comes down to IT teams, and then you have your backup team, you have your cybersecurity teams, and you have all these different networking teams. So you have so many different components. So what's the best way to do this from your perspective?
And so before we go to before I prescribe what I think might be done to do this, there are other aspects which actually force this separation, right? So one which I just explained, that is just one of the aspects. Second aspect is so I'll give you an example to state the difference in the urgency, right? So let's say you work in a bank and you found a pod of some worker. In the pod, you find the keys to the vault, right? Now, if you found that out, you need to look. It's a more urgency based thing, right? Versus just looking for, hey, this contract paper should not be out here and they need to be put back in properly in the secure, that kind of thing. The urgency differs. So basically, the frequency at which you would classify the data for looking for regulation centric data differs from the security side, like the password secrets. You want to constantly be on lookout for anything lying around like that. So that is one of the aspects. Now, the second aspect, again, I have a tricky question for you, Demetrius. Let's say, I know you're a security cautious person, but let's say if you were to write your passwords, your secrets, those kind of things, and keep it in a file, if you did, where will you keep it? Which place you think out of your overall work environment, right? You have lots of places. Where will you keep it?
If I was to, it probably would be like outside of a digital format. It would be like a book or something. I would write it in.
but you need to quickly access it. So you have to put it in a digital, let's say, right?
Okay, a password manager then. What about that?
Yeah, password manager, you so they don't give you ability to store everything. So basically,
Okay.
I like how you're dodging that question.
I'm not dodging.
To put it in a Word file. If
Okay. Yeah,
so,
maybe a notepad or something like that.
exactly, and that's what I'm getting to. That not that. So yeah, the it's not about who puts it where, but the typical mindset would be not to keep it in a, even if it is internal to company, it will not be largely accessible places where typically the regulation center classification targets for looking for PII and credit card, because there that's where you find reports generated from some application which would contain that type of data. But for this type of data, the probably right places to start is personal devices, right? Like where they might keep it in there, and that's where you need to find if these are like that. So that's another reason for segregating this, right? And the third thing, which is very crucial, is what happens if these are found, right? So when sensitive data is found, like PII, credit card, the remedial actions are like, okay, first of all, are we even requiring to keep this? If no, then we should delete it. But if we are, then properly secure it, right? Okay, it should not be that Demetrius needs access to it. So remove his access, just keep Anand and another person's access who need it for that job, kind of thing. Right? So those are the type of remedial actions you would take for when you find the PII type of data, making sure that you need it and then it is stored securely and only the persons who need the access have it. Now, if you found the password, secrets, that type of data, changing permission, if you ask the security person, that's not what they want. They want the first thing they want is get it out of wherever it is and put it in secure, as you just said, right? Password manager tools or somewhere secure. That's the first thing they're going to. But that's just the first thing. Now, there are other things they must do as a security team members, that they need to first figure out, okay, just going back to that part example, right? If you found keys, what if you didn't know what those keys were? The first thing you'll start doing is, okay, what does this open? Are these keys for cabinet? Are these keys for the vault? What it is for? So it's the same way security teams will need to look for, okay, this thing which we found, is it a secret key for the cloud account? If yes, which cloud account it's being used for, or was it an old one? It was just lying around, it is no longer valid. So that they need to determine that. And then later, they have to also find out if something happened using that key, right? So they need to go and look for, so it's if you found an open door, a security incident, right? How you need to make sure what's the cameras, to see if anybody passed through, it was just an accidental door open, or somebody did actually come in and go out. So similarly, security teams need to do a full incident inquiry, right? To find out what happened. And then the last piece, why? Why did, why was it this required that this key, password, whatever it was lying around in a separate place, which where it shouldn't be? Are there like technological challenges which are actually causing someone to keep the passwords or secrets or whatever in there? How to fix that? That entire flow of post you find that particular type of data is completely different. So that's why. So I just listed now the whole and life cycle, if you will, of why it needs to differ from when you find a PII credit card type of data versus when you find like secrets or those kind of sensitive data.
Okay. And is this something that artificial intelligence can help out with as far as being able to do it faster and more efficiently, and also just overall from maybe an agentic perspective, or because that's the hot thing right now, building agentic models and the agents and things like that. Is that something that fits within this criteria?
It could. And it's not, yes, to answer your question, yes, but the topic or so that's like the next thing, right? How do you do it is the next thing. Right now, you, the awareness of, hey, these two need to be segregated, needs to be first acted on. Because at least if there is security incident, it's not that your IT teams who handles regulation centric classification would know about it, right? there will be a smaller set of people who would know about a security incident. Of course, they will be working hard to curtail it. And then if it actually requires a disclosure, they would bring in legal and then compliance team at that point in time. But they don't like the classification admin, if you will, who configures the policies looking for PI credit card. They should not be aware of, hey, by the way, I also know that these are the password secrets lying around in this person's personal OneDrive.
Yeah.
That's what we are talking about. You're segregating that.
And is this now who makes this decision? Is this it has to come from the top down because
Exactly.
I don't see just an everyday cybersecurity expert. They're so stressed out, they're tired, they are overworked, and they're working on so many other different items. And so I'm sure it has to come from the top down. Is that
Absolutely. And that's where this is awareness first, right? From top down first, there need to be an awareness that, okay, this makes sense to segregate this, right? And once you have that, then it trickles down into the actual practitioners where how you would go about doing this. There could be N ways to do this, but one of the ways is better have two separate deployments of the classification solution, whether it's SaaS based or on, just keep two separate deployments. Then the security teams will only have access and enable the policies to the deployment or the particular installation, which look for only password secrets and those type of things. In similar fashion, the other one, the regulation centric, will only look for credit card, PII, HIPAA, and not the secrets or password type of. So that's the first. And then, as I said at the beginning of our conversation, that the security teams still need to know about the regulation centric data because they need to also ensure, poor guys, they have more job, more work, that they need to also ensure that particular data is secure. But then the password secret, whether it is lying around and who has access to it, that type of thing should only be known to them, not to the compliance team. So basically, security teams get access to both these installations of classification and the results of those, but the compliance team does not or should not have initially at least access to where are the passwords lying around. What security teams can do is later figure out, as I said, if once they do the entire workflow of finding out if anyone used this key, was it usable, what time period it was exposed, all that, right? Then they can decide to notify the compliance team that, hey, we think that this other data might have been compromised. There is a chance that we don't know whether somebody accessed or not accessed, and you decide whether now we have to disclose or not. So that's how it should be from top down.
Maybe one more question here. Where can security professionals and I guess anyone that is dealing with working with controls that keeps data safe, like role-based access control, and of course I think we're still hearing about zero trust. I don't hear about it as much as I used to. It used to be a really hot buzzword, but I think it's cooled down a little bit. But where can Gumbo get listeners go to maybe find some of the best practices or more information about the separation of controls when it pertains to data classification?
I think they need to go and start talking to their classification providers and their overall solution providers. And here is the other thing they can do. Not to everything manual is always complex and error prone and then adds more work for you. So what they can also do is talk to their data management platform providers who have this ability to orchestrate this, right? That if this type of data is found, then do this kind of thing also. So that way, it's not just the control of finding, but the action piece is also taken care of in a more automated fashion versus having to deal with single time controls like unpack and things like this is still going to evolve, Demetrius. I think it's just we are at the place where we would now start thinking about these segregations and slowly this will evolve. But they should basically, the two teams to talk to is their data management solution providers and classification, assuming they do the same, talk to them basically.
And as you hear, there's a lot of uncertainty right now, economic uncertainty. We seem to be headed into a recession as you turn on the TV and that's all right. 35% chance of heading into a recession and these tariffs here. And it's a lot of stuff going on right now. So if you think about a college student that's getting ready to graduate, right? And let's say in May, what advice would you give to them overall around trying to enter into the job market, especially on the IT side? And maybe it could be data management or not, but what advice would you give a 20 something year old?
Well, it's instead of giving my advice, Demetrius, I'll give advice which I read at one page. I forgot which particular study published this, right?
Mhm.
What I saw was, especially who are aspiring to go into this security world, which we are talking about, right? More and more, what is happening is the skills and tools portion of the requirements they're required. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they're not required, but their percentage of in the overall requirements has decreased, and then now the leaders are more looking for communication skills and organization skills, discipline, that type of thing more, to then have those type of employees in these type of roles versus somebody who has been only doing security and then may not have these other soft skills, if you will.
Yeah.
Because if you think, if you found a problem, you have to quickly tell what it is and then also suggest solutions to that. And you have to talk it out with your seniors and
Right.
parallel teams versus you alone have to resolve this, because this is not something, these are the problems, not something a single person can fix, right? So I think that's where I would advise that also look for these other avenues. And obviously, I would tell them that get familiar with using AI, Gen AI, but in a way that it's safe and in a way that you don't trust it completely. You have your own judgment at back when you're using the Gen AI. So that's okay.
Yeah, and I remember seeing something in the Future of Jobs report from the World Economic Forum. They went into the soft skills that will be needed in order to differentiate yourself and take you into the future. Yeah, I read something very similar. Really appreciate the insight that you have brought here. And it also makes me think about the separation of controls as it pertains to data classification. And it's not a conversation that I have often. So I really appreciate you being a guest here. And are there any final shout outs or anything you would like to point out for the Gumbo listeners or actions to take?
Yeah, actions we did cover, right? So this is what
Yeah.
we could start doing. From assessment perspective, I think the industry took a long time to segregate disaster recovery and cyber recovery. They're still doing it. I think this is probably also might take a long time that, oh yeah, no, this is right. We need to segregate. This needs to be thought through well and built into solutions versus manual segregation. So I think that's what I would think right now that needs to happen from this perspective. Yeah, that's what I'll say right now, Demetrius.
All right. And Data Protection Gumbo listeners, you have heard from the data management veteran himself, Anand, and we are going to also have a very fantastic and insightful episode coming up too around on the next show. I can't really talk about it right now, but make sure you tune in on YouTube as well. We have a slowly growing channel on YouTube, so check us out there at Data Protection Gumbo. And also join the Backup and Recovery Professionals group on LinkedIn as well. There's 26,000 experts in that group, so a lot of people to mix and mingle with, especially in today's job market where you need to network in order to get that next position, because layoffs are happening, and I don't think that we're quite done yet. I think we're still going to hear more and more of companies shedding and being more efficient, especially due to AI. Nan, thank you so much again for being a guest here.
Thanks, Demetrius. Thanks again for having me.